Piava General Hospital, James formed a relationship with the director. He's a surgeon from Poland. So interesting guy. He got some amazing equipment for this hospital, like an MRI machine and CT scanner, these big, expensive machines. But they don't have clean water in their hospital. So to me, I'm like, you got to start with that. You can't have sick patients drinking, coming in for waterborne illness and then giving them water that's not safe to drink. So surgeons are washing their hands with water. So we went around. So here's what, I'm going to show you what we did, and then I'm going to let you know how you can help us. So the hospital has water from many different sources to meet the demand. Rain catchment provides enough water most of the time, but they have a dry season, and the hospital cannot be without water ever. So, and they use a lot of water. So laundry, cleaning, everything. So unfortunately, they connected these hoses to wells and the river and a reservoir that they fill up with river water as well as well water. They connected it to the rain catchment containers, thinking that whenever the rain is low, they can top off these containers. But now they're mixing that rainwater is pretty clean. It comes off of the roof, so there's probably, bird poop or something from trees falling on the roof. Stuff gets in the rainwater. But when we tested the rain catchment systems for E. coli, we usually didn't find any. So they're mixing that water with the bad water. So all of their water has a mix of water. So that is one of the issues. They also have city water that I think was going to one of the buildings. So we use these kits. You can see these bags laying on the mat there, and the ones that turn green means there's E. coli. If it's all yellow, it means there's no E. coli. That's all we can tell them. So this is where we need your help to find out what else is in their water. So we're going to provide a bunch of water samples that we took. Up in the right-hand corner, you see there's like a table with little yellow and green boxes. So there's 5 different compartments in each bag, and depending on which compartments turn green, it tells you how much E. coli is in there. If a little bit of E. coli is in there, it's still probably safe because your stomach can handle that. And their stomachs are stronger than ours. They can handle, their immune systems are used to more bacteria, or different kinds of bacteria than we're used to. So a little bit of bacteria, they usually don't get sick unless they have a weak immune system, which, children, babies have weak immune systems. So unfortunately, some of them get diarrhea and they die from it, and all they need is bacteria, or all they needed to do was boil or filter their water. It's that simple, something that we take for granted. So what we want to do is we want to evaluate the water quality. We want to discuss what the issues are, what are the risks caused by that, and then we want to make recommendations to the hospital. Given the context that they don't have a lot of money, they don't have a lot of resources, they're in a remote location, we have to think about that when we make recommendations. We can't suggest they go out and buy a $5 million system because that's not realistic. So we have to think about what can you do in low resources. They're not going to have a municipal source like we have, where chlorine is added and other filters and chemicals are added to our water to remove all the contaminants. So I already kind of went through the methods. I collected 15 samples at the hospital from the different water sources around the campus. We also found a creek just outside. They're kind of on a hill that they turned into a plateau. They flattened the top of a hill to install the hospital, to build the hospital. And then on the side of the hill is a little creek. And when we went out there, this lady was fetching water. And a local told me that everyone in the surrounding communities get water from that creek. And we also found out that the hospital releases their sewage right next to that creek on the side of the hill. And when I looked at it, I saw rubber gloves in there, which means they're not even properly removing things from the dirty water that's coming out of the hospital that's probably contaminating this creek. So that's a separate issue, is sewage water treatment. The water that comes out of a property that's gone down the drain, the dirty water, the sewage, is also called effluent. That's like a common word that they use for effluent is supposed to be treated, and there's also pharmaceutical things that, you know, things from the medications that get flushed down the toilet that end up coming out of the drains and recontaminating the water, making the people sick who are coming to the hospital. So it's a very frustrating thing to see. So 13 of the 15 samples tested positive for E. coli. Only 2 samples had no E. coli, and we're not sure why. It's possible that those sources only had rain catchment, or that there was a minimal amount of river water mixing in with the rainwater, so it's possible that they were the lucky ones that didn't have high amounts of E. coli. 7 of the samples were in the highest range, where the entire 5 compartments in the sample all turned dark green. And that means that there's more than 100 parts per million of E. coli. So those are considered unsafe for anybody to drink. This is just to give you an idea of some of these rain catchment systems. These are some of the issues that I observed on the coffee plantation. Because I was able to get on the roof, I was able to see this. So you can see all these leaves collected there's like a little mesh screen where the water goes into the tank. And then if you look at the gutter has standing water. And in that water is all kinds of algae, bugs, you name it. And no one's maintaining this, so you think about that too when you make your recommendations. So in the last 3 years, we've tested 136 sites. Some of the sites were repeats. We came back a year later, tested it again to see if we get different results, which is really important in science. One data point doesn't prove that water's contaminated. Maybe my fingers were dirty and I contaminated that test. So by going back and having multiple samples of the same site, we're able to establish history and a stronger scientific evidence of what the issues are. So 95% of the natural and untreated sources that we tested had unsafe levels of E. coli in it. And most of the rain catchment systems that we tested did not have any E. coli at all. And you can try to come up with reasons why a few of the sites did have E. coli, because that's one of the questions. So long-term solution, could we have a system that uses ultraviolet lights? Could we treat the water with chemicals? Could we have a reverse osmosis system? What do these systems cost? What kind of maintenance is involved? We need to train the locals. How much training is involved? What kind of spare parts do they need for these types of systems? You have to think about all of that. There's a lot of case studies that you can find online where people donated a photovoltaic system or a water treatment system to a place in Africa or Central America or Papua New Guinea. And they come back a year later and all the parts are broken. No one was trained. And so they thought they did something good. They really didn't do anything. And James mentioned the word sustainability. Sustainability means a permanent solution that's going to last, and that's going to provide that resource for future generations. So what is going to be sustainable? So I won't go through all of these, but here's our test results, and I'll share this with Mr. Cheever after. But these are the tests I took. I walked around with the facilities manager, and I asked him, okay, this water coming out of the sink, where is it coming from? And he helped me map it out for each water source. So when we look at our water tests, we want to try to get an idea of what might be causing the contamination. So in the men's dorm, they have a river that goes to the rain catchment, and then they have rainwater coming off the roof of the dorm and mixing together. And Tuffa is the name of the tanks. They're called Tuffa tanks. That's those big green rain catchment tanks. So some of them were more complicated. Oh, here's a good one. The mess hall. That's where they cook all the food for the entire hospital. So if you look on the right, those are the results. High risk, possibly unsafe. So they had a moderate to high level of E. coli in the sink water where they're washing all the vegetables, washing their hands. They do boil the water usually when they're cooking the vegetables. So that does kill the E. coli, but I don't know what else is in the water. So I'm hoping you guys will tell us what else is in that water. Ablutions, I don't know what that means. That was the name of the building. They were just getting water from the well, and it had the highest level of E. coli, unsafe. So what does that tell us? If the water's only coming from the well, we can isolate that source of water and the results that we're getting. So we know for sure the contamination is coming from the well if that's the only water that's mixing and going into that sink. And there was a little spigot outside of the bathroom with water kind of trickling out. You see people walk up and stick their, kind of like drinking out of the hose. You would see people walking around the hospital, going up there, drinking that water. And knowing this, it's not good. So here's a more complicated one. They had these spigots that they would fill buckets of water to use for cleaning all of the hospital wards. And here it was confusing. They were mixing all these different sources of water together. And then they had a big truck with big containers on the back, and they said that when they couldn't pump enough water from the river, they would actually drive down the side of the mountain, down to the river, and use a gas generator and pump water into these containers and drive back up to the hill and dump that water into these reservoirs to have extra water. And that water was mixing together with all the other water sources. So that's pretty much it. I have 15 of them here. We don't need to talk about each one. But they had a school on site. I think it was for the employees' children or for patients. If they had children there, they could go to school on the hospital grounds. They didn't have running water in the little school building. What they had was one of our buckets that we gave them last year. And I went up to the teacher and I said, "Oh, great, you have a bucket, so you're filtering the water, right?" And she's like, "No, the filter's broken. We just fill it up from the spigot, which we know is not safe to drink." So she was just using the bucket to fetch water and pouring it into cups. And this is where I said follow-up is necessary. These filters can last 20 years. I think it's a charcoal membrane, so there's no moving parts, there's no batteries, there's no electronics. The water filters through, and once the sediment builds up in the filter, you have to flush it out. She didn't know how to flush it, so she thought the filter wasn't working because the water stopped coming out. So, very simple thing to fix, right? But, when someone's had a way of life for their entire life, we think we can go in there and tell them something that is very simple to us in our everyday life, and we just think they're going to understand that. And they always nod, they always say yes, they're very polite, and so we think, oh, we've helped them. And we come back and we find out they're not cleaning the filter because they don't have time, or a new teacher came on and the old teacher didn't show the new teacher how to use the filter, how to clean the filter. And it takes a lot of patience, but it's just something to be aware of, like tying your shoe. You don't think about tying your shoe. You learned how to tie your shoe when you were very young. And it's things like that where you think, oh, I go in and I show them something that's very simple to me. I expect it to be just as simple for them. And it's just something to be aware of when you do these kind of trips. They're very smart people, very sharp, very expressive. And unfortunately, there's a lot of ignorance. People think that someone's dumb because they can't speak good English or because they don't know how to use a simple filter that you showed them how to use. And they might be smarter than you. If they had access to education, they have a really good rugby team, for example. The ones that have food and a coach and a trainer and resources and money to go to school,